I'm so excited today because we are interviewing Dr. Stephen Hall, and he is the author of this wonderful book called The 7 Tools of Healing. Unlock your inner wisdom and live the life your soul desires. And we even have a foreword to this book by Bernie Siegel, MD, who wrote Love, Medicine, and Miracles. And I've read most of his books. And he loves Stephen, and so now I love Stephen too, and I love this book, and it's really very integral. You know, we're going to talk about integrated medicine, and he'll explain the difference between traditional medicine, functional medicine, and integrated medicine. So thank you so much for joining us, Steve.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So let's get started with finding out a little bit about your background. I didn't want to read it. I wanted you to just tell us you decided to go to medical school, and what was that all about, and how did that lead you to where you are today?
Well, I just sort of had this insight when I was in 6th grade that I wanted to be a doctor. And I didn't really know much about that, like what it meant to be a doctor. And I just had that tucked away. And as I went through the rest of my schooling, I found I was just pretty good at science. And so I have a pretty strong background in science. I've got a degree in chemistry, a degree in material science and engineering, and I'm just shy of a degree in physics. And I was interested not just in the content of science, though, but how did science work? You know, how do we actually know that what we think we know is true?
Yeah.
And so I really studied the scientific process as well. You know, how do we answer these kinds of questions?
Right.
And so then when I got into medical school, I actually was quite shocked because we weren't really asked to think. We were asked to memorize.
Right.
And I always hated memorizing things. And so I really had to shift gears in my brain to memorize all the drugs and pharmacology and memorize all the
parts of
anatomy.
the body. I remember when my ex was in medical school, and I'd have to test him about all the little bones in your hands, and he'd pick up all these acronyms to try and remember.
The
So I know
mnemonics,
exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And so after 2 years of this, it's pretty easy to put your analytical problem solving brain kind of in the back. And a lot of times we're just trained to follow recipes, so to speak. And I never felt comfortable with that. And even my first year of medical school, I started meeting people whose experiences with their own health didn't fit the medical model.
Right.
For example, I met a woman who healed her husband's Crohn's disease by putting him on an organic food diet. This was back in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
And then when we studied Crohn's disease, they never mentioned organic food diet as one of the treatments.
Crazy.
And something in my head said, don't raise your hand and ask. And but I filed it away and says, because so medicine, conventional medicine is not like a complete system of healing.
Right.
So, for example, think of one thing in your life that has no influence on your health whatsoever. Can you think of anything?
No, I can't think of anything because I'm very much into body, mind, spirit. So my thoughts affect, and I've read Louise Hay, about you can heal your life. So I
And
know
Bruce
that if
Lipton.
I have negative thoughts, I'm going to have something going wrong in my body.
And Bruce Lipton wrote The Biology of Beliefs. So what you believe actually determines genetic expression in the cell.
Right.
So it just makes sense to have a medicine that can take into account all of human experience. And so that's what I've been trying to develop in my practice and trying to practice. And so I came across Ken Wilber's work many years ago. And are you familiar with him too? It sounds like you are. Yeah. And he said, this is the first time in human experience that we have access to all of human knowing. So what do all the different world traditions have to say about how you go from a newborn baby to a fully actualized human being? And maybe if we put all of these, what they say together, we can come up with a roadmap. And So he came up with these 4 quadrants, and each quadrant has levels and steps in it and stuff. And medicine is basically stuck in what's called the right upper quadrant of Ken Wilber's work. Psychology would be the left upper quadrant.
Yeah.
And, sociology and geography and things like that would be the left lower quadrant. And things like ethics and actually the law, legal things would be the left lower quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
But things in all the quadrants affect your health.
Yes.
So we have to take all of those things into account. And there are actually ways to do that. So I found that functional medicine is actually a really good way to think about the human body and your biochemistry in that right upper quadrant, because it thinks more in a systems way,
right,
instead of a real reductionistic way.
Right.
And but there's a real trap with functional medicine, and that is, I call it trying to micromanage your metabolism.
Uh-huh.
That we are learning so much about all the different metabolic pathways in your body. How can you control all of them?
Right. Right.
And it comes a point where you just have to step back and trust your body's own wisdom that, hey, it knows how to put all these things into balance if we just give it what it needs. We don't have to take 40 or 50 supplements to do that most of the time. So it's very tempting to try to learn as much as you can about all the different pathways, all the different supplements that affect the pathways, and all the symptoms. And but that's really no different than conventional medicine, in that you're taking something to treat a symptom rather than treat a root cause.
Right.
And I know a lot of functional medicine.
Functional medicine, at least the one that I'm involved with right now, is into how you eat, saying that your foods are medicine too. What you take into your body is quote medicine, right?
And that's very true.
French fries, that wouldn't be good. But if I'm eating broccoli and I'm eating cauliflower and I'm eating other things, then that's kind of a medicine, right? Isn't that somewhat?
It is, and that's very important. The flip side of that is I have many patients with severe chronic illness that eat impeccably well.
Right.
And that helps them, but that's not the root cause of their problem.
Right.
They still have their arthritis or their headaches or their fibromyalgia. Now, some people it does help and their symptoms get better.
Right.
But there's still a number of people that eat really, really well, and that's still not enough. So there's deeper roots than how you eat. And that might be news to, well, I don't think so. Dr. Hyman's really he's the one that really touts the diet, and your fork's your best instrument, that sort of thing. And and his information is really good. And he's actually getting to realize that there are deeper things going on than just lifestyle and diet.
Right.
But those things are definitely an important foundation.
Yeah, so you go further into the body, mind, spirit, kind of, just like Deepak Chopra and, Larry Dossey. You are much more evolved and recognizing that consciousness has a lot to do with how healthy we are, right?
Well, and that's what I found, because over the years of my practice, and you know how many years that is.
Same amount of years as I've been in practice too for the legal profession.
Yeah. So we're just finally getting to where we think we know something, right? That's a bit dangerous, but
right.
But anyway, I kept trying to get to the root with my patients, and every time we thought we were to the root, there seemed to be something deeper, and so we'd explore more deeply, and we just kept going until turns out we actually get to what I call consciousness. And so I think my own opinion now is that consciousness is the root of everything. And it's how we manifest that consciousness that determines our life. And so if you're working to change something that's already been created, like you're working to lower your blood pressure, or you're working to whatever it is,
right.
The horse is already out of the barn, so to speak. So you can keep doing that work, but it's still getting created. See? And so that's why you have to get on your blood pressure medicine and stay on it. It doesn't ever, it's not that causes your high blood pressure. But there's some kind of determinant of your conscious flow that's allowing that blood pressure to manifest in your life. And if you can access that and change that, then the high blood pressure stops getting created and it goes away. And then you can stop your blood pressure medicine.
Right. And I wonder about, these people who have a spontaneous spiritual healing, because the body and the mind and the spirit do know what to do. The body, like I always think about this, if I get a cut on my finger, I don't have to even tell it to heal or do anything. It just heals, right?
Yep, it just knows how.
Right. So we know that the body knows how to do it. We just get in the way, don't we?
A lot of times. I mean, most of us have what I call limiting beliefs, which are beliefs that tell ourselves that we're smaller than we really are. So any belief that says you're less than a divine being of light basically is a false belief, right?
Right.
And so we all have beliefs that say, well, I don't deserve this, or I'm not good enough, or that sort of thing. And so when and that's an interesting example. If you collect, say, 100 stories of people who have had spontaneous remissions from their disease, and you start to say, well, okay, what really happened here? They all seem to do something different, right? But what they really did was they had these aha moments and their perceptions radically shifted. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and then that
a lot of sense.
And that led them to do the research they needed in order to eat 8 plates of greens a day or whatever, or watch Charlie Chaplin movies and laugh all day long. Or, the things that people have done to get better vary all over the place. But the deeper thing that they all did was they all went into that dark night of their soul, so to speak, and had these aha moments that opened them up to their own knowing, basically. And then they started following their knowing.
Right. Their beliefs change about who they are and what. I know. I remember reading in Bernie Siegel's books too, about, these patients, these cancer patients. It was this one guy, they said they found this new medicine and it was going to cure him. And he immediately got better. And then he read in the paper that that wasn't right, that it really wasn't helping. And then he got sick and died, So there's another cute story, which you probably know. I just have to share it because I always loved it. There's this guy that's in the hospital, and the radiologist comes and says, I can cure you. And he goes, go away. God's going to cure me. God's going to cure me. And then the chemotherapist comes in and he goes, I'm going to cure you, and he goes, go away. God's going to cure me. And then the surgeon comes in and goes, I'm going to cut and cure. And he goes, go away. God's going to cure me. And then obviously that was the end. But, if he really, really believed that God was going to cure him, it might have done that, right?
Right. And the story I heard was that he continues to get sick, and right before he dies, he says, God, I thought you were going to cure me. And God says,
I sent you. I sent you the surgeon. I sent you the radiologist. I sent you, exactly.
Yeah.
But this book, let's talk a little bit about this book, because you've got 7 tools. And I'd like to start talking about the tools so that people can learn a little bit more. And then if they're excited about it like I am, they'll want to get the book. So let's get to the 7 tools. Start out with 1?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, the first tool I think of as a foundation, and I call it faith, because that's kind of what People's Own Inner Wisdom calls it. And there's a lot of confusion about faith in our society. We tend to assume faith means a certain set of beliefs.
Right.
Like you have a beliefs in God, or belief in Jesus, or belief in Muhammad, or whatever. It's a certain set of beliefs. But how the Inner Wisdom uses it is it's actually kind of a measurement for how strongly you believe what you believe. And so you can have a belief and it kind of have a so-so faith in it, and then it's not a very strong belief in your life. or you can have another belief that you would defend to the death.
Right.
And then you have a lot of faith in that belief. And what we see is how easily that belief manifests in your life depends on how strongly you believe it.
Mm.
And so strengthening the faith in your beliefs is something that gets better with practice. So the challenge is to choose what you want to believe and then practice strengthening your faith in it.
Right.
And so if you believe you can get better, if you can believe your life can improve, if you believe you're enough just as you are, you don't have to be any different. So pick a set of beliefs that are really beneficial for you, and then focus on really strengthening your faith in those beliefs. So that's what faith is. And I think about like a foundation everything else is built upon. So that's why it's the first tool.
I think the challenge for a lot of people is they might say, yeah, I believe I'm going to get better. I believe it. And they start to do some things, but then they've got these negative thoughts that get in there. It's
Right.
like the old cartoons that maybe you remember, you're going to get better.
Devil on one side.
No, you're not. No, you're not. Remember
Right.
that, the devil and the angel? And I think
Exactly.
we got to shut off that negative devil,
and
right?
and there's a way to do that, because if you try to force it to shut off, what happens?
It's going to come stronger.
It gets stronger. Exactly. So you can't force these things. And that's where most self-help techniques make a big mistake. And so the 7 tools actually corrects that mistake. We'll explain how all that works.
Okay.
So exactly right, because the vast majority of your beliefs actually hang out in the unconscious part of your mind. They're back here making up your worldview, and you don't know they're there, but that they make the world look the way it looks to you, and you think that's reality. So you need a way to get into the unconscious, find those beliefs that are tripping you up, the negative, and change them. And practice the 7 tools is the best way I've ever found to do that. But yeah, so I think about doubt as the test of faith. And if the doubt wins, that means your faith wasn't strong enough, and you got to keep practicing strengthening your faith.
Right.
But then you can also, as we'll talk about, there's a practice you can do to help eliminate the doubt as well.
Right.
So yeah, that's exactly right. We all have these tugs of war going on inside, but there's a way to deal with it.
Our inner conflict, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we got to resolve our inner conflict first.
Exactly. And I just want to say too, I really like your metaphor of conflict as a disease, and that it can be treated. And there's so much truth in that. And so I really applaud you in that work that you're doing along those lines. So the second tool is awareness. Another word for that is mindfulness.
Right.
And there's all kinds of studies, as you know, about the power of mindfulness. And that's really important. And so what awareness does is it moves things from the not known pile over to the known pile. And so basically it grows your consciousness, your ego type consciousness, and what your conscious mind.
Yes.
And so it's much easier to work on something if you know it's there.
Right. You can't fix what you don't know about, right?
Exactly. So you use the mindfulness to watch yourself, watch how you're feeling, because there's a constant flow of feelings inside in response to all the sensory information you're getting, everything that's going on in your body.
That energy. Yeah, that whole energy, to be aware of your energy. I know you
can watch your energy
up too. Yeah.
You can watch your physical body. You can watch your mind, thinking thoughts. So you can watch how the environment affects you. You can watch how other people affect you. So there's all kinds of things. That's why awareness is the biggest chapter in the book. There's so many things to become aware of, right?
Yes.
And so mindfulness is really important, but it seems like most mindfulness practices don't ever go on to say, well, okay, what do you do with what you just became mindful of?
Right.
And so what the 7 tools says is you apply the 3rd tool to it, which is you have to acknowledge it. And when I was first observing these tools and I was working on my patients, I sort of glossed over that step, thinking, oh yeah, and I didn't think it was very important. But the more I've worked with these tools, the more I think this 3rd tool is one of the most important,
Mm.
ones, because again, it's what gets missed by most self-help techniques. So what acknowledge says is, yeah, this is my truth. This is what's happening to me. This is how I feel. This is what my knee feels like. This is what my headache feels like. This is what so-and-so said to me, you know. So it's really acknowledging your truth.
Okay.
And there's an important law that says, you shall know your truth, your truth shall.
Set you free.
Exactly. So so if you want to be free of your headache or free of your fibromyalgia or free of your depression, whatever it is, you've got to be working with your truth of it, because the saying isn't, you shall know your fantasy and your fantasy shall set you free, unfortunately, because that would be a lot easier, right?
Yeah.
So
I remember,
anyway,
it kind of reminds me when you're talking about that, when I learned the Lamaze method when I had my kids, is that I felt the pain, but I breathed into it. You know, I didn't fight it.
right.
I just went with it. And I've remembered that to this day, and I do Reiki and all that stuff too. But is that what you mean? You kind of go into it and feel it and acknowledge it. This is what I'm feeling, instead of
Mhm.
try and take an aspirin or a Tylenol to make it go away. You really just go into that feeling. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. And
Okay.
into the experience of your whole life in this moment.
Okay.
Because the second you say, oh, there's something wrong with me that needs to change, the
Mm.
second you say that, which is what motivates everybody to start changing, right? But
Right.
just starting from that place, you're already stuck.
Mm.
See? And so you've got to acknowledge your truth right now, even the uncomfortable feelings and all that. And so there's a lot of exercises about how to do that. And so once you um, are aware of your truth, and once you acknowledge your truth, that's where you really just let it in and let it be. Then what do you do? Well, what the inner wisdom says is, just be kind to yourself about that. Just get off your back about that.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's what I call compassion, which is the fourth tool. And I call compassion the alchemist, because that's what actually works the change. Because
Mm.
if you get in there and try to force that belief that you're not good enough, try to force it to change, try to talk yourself out of it, see, your creativity and goes wherever you focus your attention. And it turns out that repression and denial are forms of attention.
Mm.
So whatever you're repressing or denying, you're actually creating more of it.
It's
And
like whatever you resist persists.
yep, that saying is a expression of that particular law of consciousness. So I call these laws of consciousness.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you shall know your truth shall set you free. That's a law of consciousness. That we're all created equal. That's a law of consciousness.
Right.
There's a bunch of these laws of consciousness that.
Right.
Um, so um, yeah. So
So
the
we're talking
third
about
tool.
compassion.
Yeah. So the third tool undoes any of that resistance and denial and repression and that kind of thing. So you really have to let your truth in. So then you just be kind to
So
yourself
wait, and
about your
Steve,
truth.
yeah, that's what I was going to say, Steve. So to be compassionate, you what do you say to yourself? Do you say to yourself, I know you have a headache, just feel it and go into it, and spirit will help you get rid of it, or whatever you want to say? I help me tell my audience what we
Well,
would say to ourselves.
yeah, and that's interesting because I've had really highly educated professional people in the office, and they have never once considered the idea of being kind to themselves.
Mm,
You know, we don't know how to do that very well in our society. We're
right.
taught to be
Criticize.
selfless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and to be selfless and put yourself last, and you know, and that's a definite occupational hazard for moms, and you know, that sort of thing.
Right.
So um, so I say, well, let's say you were walking down the sidewalk and came across a puppy with a hurt leg. How would you feel towards that puppy?
Oh, I would say, oh, you poor baby. Yeah, and I'd be
Yeah.
petting it and speaking to it sweetly, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and that metaphor works a lot. Until one woman once looked at me and says, "That doesn't work for me because I hate dogs."
Well, I have two dogs and I'm a dog lover, so it would work for
Yeah.
me.
So, and then so I said, well, let's say your best friend's mom passed away.
Yeah.
And so you went over to be with your best friend during
Right.
that time. How would you be with her?
Right.
I
Gentle.
mean, you can't tell her, well, feel better,
Right.
right? That doesn't work.
Right.
You could clean her house or cook a meal or just sit with her, right?
Right.
So that just that open-hearted presence, that just being present in an open-hearted way, that's what I think of as compassion.
Okay.
And that gets better with practice. So all these things get better with practice. That's what's kind of cool about these. I
Right.
really could have called them skills, but I called them tools because I'm a woodworker and
Yeah.
we have tools. And um,
After
so
compassion.
practice having compassion for yourself. So then what happens when you bring enough compassion to a particular experience that you're working with, then the sense of forgiveness just naturally follows. And once you really forgive, it's a true letting go. And I've been working on people when they've hit that point of forgiveness, and you just feel the release all through their tissues. And so you can practice forgiveness, but that doesn't seem to work as well as forgiveness arrived at through the practice of compassionate accepting awareness. So I
Mhm.
put those tools 2, 3, and 4 together, but compassionate accepting awareness. And then once you keep going with your awareness, you often start to get a glimpse of, how spirit moves behind the scenes to orchestrate all this. And people often get struck with this sense of awe or this sense of wonder. And that's what I call gratitude.
Mm.
And so when someone comes in and tells me, I wouldn't choose to go through it again, but I'm glad I got cancer, I'm glad I got hit by a car, I'm glad whatever, because of all that I've learned from it,
Right.
then I know they've gotten the healing out of that experience.
Right.
So
People
that's
that have
this.
had cancer that have said it was my greatest. Oh, believe it or not, we are just about out of time. Yeah, it's a
Oh
great
no.
teacher. Would you believe that? Well, this is so wonderful. We'll have to have you back again, but I want to make sure that we got through 4 of the tools. No, 5. We got through 5.
6.
6. Oh, we
Gratitude's
did.
the 6th tool.
Forgiveness, right?
And
Compassion,
gratitude
forgiveness, gratitude, and the last one.
is just right action. How do you actually be in the world to get the results that you want?
Right. So they're going to have to read your book to find out, right?
Sorry, I talk too much. Yeah.
No, no, no. It was wonderful. I mean, we wanted to get into depth. So I want to mention again the 7 Tools of Healing, Unlock Your Inner Wisdom and Live the Life Your Soul Desires. It's a wonderful book by Stephen M. Hall, MD. And why don't you just give your website and then we're going to have to go.
It's the7tools.com and the number 7.
Yeah. And I think you also have
The7tools.com.
one, Stephen.
M. Hall MD. That's one from my practice.
Okay.
StephenMHallMD.com.
Okay. And the 7tools.com, right?
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will have you back again very soon to talk more about
Thank
this.
you.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.